Hey, hello everyone. This is Gray. I'm here from Worldbuilders. I'm Executive Director, and we are here for another edition of Worldbuilders Weekly. And this is when we bring you the latest news from our Worldbuilders market, talk about trivia and other nerdy tangents, and have different geeks doing good stories, all thanks to your support of our work. And on lucky days like today, we have an amazing guest, such as Jeffe Kennedy, author and new president of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. Thank you for joining us, Jeffe. Appreciate you.
Thank you for having me here. It's fun.
Wow, fun already. All right.
Well, so far anyway.
We have a high bar to go. Okay, so. We don't have any real announcements right now, except to say that we are hard at work getting all of the loose ends tied up and things shipped out for the Indiegogo that we just had, our fundraiser. You helped us raise over $100,000 to help keep our work going, and we really appreciate it. And we have even more exciting things coming up and coming along. I also want to give a shout out to those of you who also not only helped us out in our Indiegogo, but also went to the Literary Tarot Project and signed up for the tier that helped out Worldbuilders. 462 people donated in that tier, and we really appreciate that you're helping out not just us as Geeks Doing Good, but other Geeks Doing Good as well. So thank you for that. So trivia, it is Trivia Tuesday, and our old trivia question, I can actually give a little demonstration of it. There's a form of art which has like isolations and flips and things like that. And the exact thing, aerials, one-handed cuts, such as that. It's not magic, but practiced card flourishers, unlike me, can really impress. What is the name of this performance art form? Any idea, Jeffe?
I mean, I would have said card tricks. So,
right route. Let's see if anybody in the chat knows what it is. Doesn't look like it. The answer, I didn't get as many things in there, so it must have been kind of hard. It's actually called cardistry.
Huh?
Yeah, and you can, if you Google cardistry, there's some amazing things. People do things that, I mean, it might as well be magic. But going on to the next one, now people that do reply to that through direct messages on any of the many platforms that we have, they get entered into a monthly drawing, and we send off various prizes to the winner of the trivia contest for the month. So here is the next question. Oh boy, this is going to be a little generational thing. It'll be a thing where, you know, some people will be like, oh yes, I know, and some people won't know at all.
Wait, which way is it going to go? Will us old people know, or will the young people know?
I should know. As an old fogey, I should know. As somebody who saw this movie in the theater, yes. In the 1989 film Back to the Future 2, we are shown a futuristic version of Marty McFly's home in the Hilldale subdivision. Ooh, this is deep trivia. What is Marty McFly's address?
Oh, I have no idea. Though right. I did see this movie in the movie theater.
Oh, okay. So we are contemporaries in that way.
Yes.
Yeah, I do also like that in the graphic for this, we have a little icon of a DeLorean, which is up there. You know, I thought of an interesting, and we may use this for trivia later on. And if you saw this in the movie theater, you'll probably know the answer to this question. But if I had an old VHS tape and I put a little piece of tape over the record tab, why would I be doing that?
You know, I kind of remember doing that even. Yeah. So that no one could record over it. So like if you taped your show, then someone couldn't come along and like take Price is Right on top of your movie.
Yes, exactly. Actually, it was, if you took it off, you could, if you cut the record tab, you couldn't record to it. If you put a tape over it, it's so that you
could. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, exactly. It's like one of those things like, you know, That's something that some people remember, and some people are like, why would you do that? What does it
I
matter?
mean, kids these days will never know the sheer frustration of like watching some show that you painstakingly recorded and then have it like stop before the end because like your mother went and recorded something
Over, yeah.
totally awful over it. Yes.
Yep, exactly. Or just how low quality you would watch that show over and over again because it would get worse every time you watched it.
Yep.
Yeah, well, the chat, be kind, rewind. uh, that's something we had on all of our DVDs. The I should actually read your official bio here. Yes, we're bringing back some painful memories to people apparently. So Jeffe Kennedy is an award-winning author whose works include novels, nonfiction, poetry, and short fiction. She has won the prestigious Rita Award from the Romance Writers of America, RWA, has been a finalist twice, been a UCross Foundation Fellow, received the Wyoming Arts Council Fellowship for Poetry, and was awarded a Franklin Nelson Doubleday Memorial Award. Has served on the board of directors for the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America as a director at large, and is the current and inaugural president. Has it been a week now that it's been?
Yeah, since July 1st. So
How you holding up?
so far so good.
Right. And you can find out all of this and a more extensive listing of her works on her website, jeffekennedy.com, along with many other places. And frankly, I mean, I could spend the whole rest of the time trying to just describe all of the work that you have out there in so many different places. And I kind of wanted to start by just asking you for like, your origin story. Like what changed Jeffe Kennedy into award-winning author and president of SFWA, Jeffe Kennedy? I mean, what was the process?
I mean, it's like a feature-length movie for this origin story, but I started out as a scientist. I was in grad school getting my PhD in neurophysiology back in the day, and decided that I wasn't happy doing that and that I wanted to be a writer. So I started sort of, cut bait, got my master's degree, and started taking classes with visiting writers. I started out as an essayist. My first book is an essay collection with a university press, which I quickly discovered was no way to make a living. And, and I, especially because this was all in the early 90s, and that was when the internet became big and blogging really cut the feet out from under, being any kind of nonfiction writer. You just couldn't make a living at it for a while there, for those of us who lived through that era. And I moved into writing fiction because I really wanted to have a career as a writer. And I discovered pretty quickly that what came out was this weird cross-genre mix that was both fantasy and romance, and somehow neither, which made it even harder.
I loved your catchphrase at the beginning of your video. I write fantasy romance and romantic fantasy.
Yes, I've had publishers describe it both ways, and sometimes people ask me what's the difference, and I'm like, depends on the publisher.
We're gonna get to that question later on, but I'm sorry. I heard your origin story. So
yeah. And so basically I've just persisted in writing the thing that I love to write. And, that's where I'm at today, mainly writing novels. I have a number of series going, and I'm hybrid, pretty much half and half trad and self-publishing, and supporting my household with it. So that's a good thing.
Well, that always, if you can make a living at it and you don't mind it, then that's pretty much the dream.
That it is.
Yeah, you mentioned, the genres, and I have a screenshot of your genre page of your website. We have contemporary romance, fantasy romance, futuristic romance, vampire romance, dystopian romance, BDSM romance, erotic romance, anthology, short story, horror, nonfiction, paranormal romance, fantasy with romantic elements, erotic paranormal, novella, completed series, standalone, and eggs, bacon, and spam. Yeah.
We kind of did that for people going to my website and trying to figure out like where should they start.
Right,
and so that's
like
one
a guidebook
avenue
for that. That's actually how the tweet about the dystopian vampire romance went in there. Was that little guide thing of, well, are you looking for this? Or are you looking for this? Which I think is great. I wish more authors had that, but you have such a huge thing on there. I guess I kind of both want to know about your writing process, both daily. I mean, like I know you have like a 3,000 word a day limit for yourself.
You've been listening.
Yeah. Oh, we do our research.
Yeah.
But also like in terms of planning out new projects, like you must, I picture like you must have like this 5-year plan with all these different books and a map out there or something. Like how do you do this on both a daily and a big picture thing?
Well, I'm a big fan of Excel. So I am the spreadsheet queen, as some of my friends call me. So I do have things mapped out, usually just a couple of years, because things change, especially if you're working with trad also. You never know what they're, like what they might buy and then how they decide to schedule things.
By trad, you mean traditional publishing versus?
Yes, sorry, traditional publishing versus self-publishing. Self-publishing, I can control all of my deadlines. When I'm working with a publisher, I am subject to their schedules.
Gotcha.
And on a daily basis, yes, I work 5 days a week. I write primarily in the mornings, and I try to get 3,000 words a day. I don't go past 3,000 words a day in general because I find that I pay the price later. That's sort of my sustainable productivity. And so yeah, I have it scheduled out. I know that I can reliably draft a book within a certain amount of time and how long it takes me to revise. And so I set up my schedule according to that. And then it just sort of, a lot of how I make decisions is based on which series are selling the best, which books my readers want from me. Every once in a while, I have something that I really, really want to write, but then that ends up being a fiscal decision, right? Because it's like, this is how I am paying the mortgage and buying groceries and so forth. So sometimes I have to be practical about the choices I make.
Right. You seem very connected to your fans and readers and the community. Has that changed at all during the COVID crisis? Were you mainly a convention like meetup kind of person, or has it always been online for you?
Well, it's always been largely online. I mean, social media is just how I've interacted with people. Yeah, I was an early adopter of the internet. I don't usually think of myself as an early adopter, but compared to some, I was. And especially because I write this weird cross-genre stuff, the initial publishers that took a chance on me were those who were digital first and able to try out some things that there wasn't a clear spot on the bookshelf for. And so because you're working with ebooks and digital publishing, then social media is a natural venue for that. I do love in-person conventions. And so one of my great realizations during the pandemic was how much of my social engagement came from going to conventions. I didn't realize, because I'm a writer, I'm an introvert, I stay home all day. I don't like leaving my house if I don't have to. But I realized that I did leave my house to go to conventions where I would spend, those intense few days where I didn't sleep, but sat up all night talking to my friends in the bar and so forth. And then I would come home and have to recharge for a couple of weeks after that. And in the pandemic, not having that was, it was a surprise to me how impactful that was.
Yeah, we actually came in, and it's kind of funny, shortly before the pandemic hit, we had just been setting up a mock booth downstairs in the warehouse. So we know what we were going to bring and how it was going to look and everything set up. And then, of course, it just sat there for most of the pandemic because it just didn't actually happen.
Yeah.
Well, outside of, I mean, you mentioned that you have to write what is going to pay the bills. But do you have like a favorite genre or one that's easier than others?
Well, I am writing my favorite genre. So, I mean, I'm not entirely practical about that sort of thing. I love writing fantasy. I write alternate world fantasy. I love the whole magic and the epic sweep and political machinations. And I like there to be a lot of kissing involved. So that's my sweet spot. If I were being entirely mercenary, I would have figured out a long time ago to write something a lot more mainstream. And I occasionally get that advice, like, oh, well, you should just try writing fantasy or not have all of that romance in there. And it's not what I love. So back when I was first trying to get my first book published and I was, getting lots and lots of interest, I didn't know how lucky I was, but, I had many agents and publishers requesting the full and then saying, we love the story, we love your writing, we have no idea how to market this book. Catherine Asaro read it for me and she said, the problem is that you're writing cross genre. She said, and it's going to be like wading through hip deep snow. And she was right. It has sometimes felt that way, but I did make the decision that I wasn't willing to relinquish that story or relinquish what I love to write best.
I once was asked to figure out like what is it exactly that makes something a romance as opposed to not a romance, and I'd like to ask your opinion of what my conclusions were. And this was based on watching some of the most what were considered some of the most romantic movies of the time and analyzing the stories. And from my analysis, what I came up with was that the key ingredients to romance in any genre, if you want to make it a romance whatever, is you have to have a lot of lingering looks and heavy sighs. You have to have a lot of overreaction, and you have to have a lot of miscommunication, and you have to have a lot of overreaction to miscommunications with heavy sighs and lots of lingering looks. And if you add those ingredients, you can pretty much make anything into a romance. Am I anywhere close to it, or?
That sounds like someone who doesn't really like romance.
Yes, but what about the smolder? Yeah, I forgot the smolder. That's true.
Smolder. There's also smoldering. I mean, I would say a lot of it is, as we say in romance, about the feels.
Okay.
That what separates a story that has romance in it, like, say, Lois McMaster Bujold, as opposed to someone who's actually writing a romance, is that there is a focus on the feelings, that there's a focus on the emotional journey. And, and so I think that is where you're getting some of the stuff with, miscommunication, if it's just there for miscommunication's sake, is considered to be lazy writing. There needs to be an actual reason that people are not communicating.
Okay, so I'm right to be a little skeptical. I mean, and this isn't actually romance, but one of my least favorite tropes is why didn't you tell me? I was trying to protect you. Like, it just, that seems to be like over, and it's almost, and it's one of the, and that's not for romance. That's in any genre. In any genre.
Unless the information really is, unless withholding that information really is protecting the other person, then it becomes a more real thing. Like, had you known that you were going to give birth to the savior of humanity, would you really have slept with me if you knew I was going to die immediately afterwards? It's
right.
There are reasons for, but they have to be good reasons for secrets.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. And by the way, that was actually not meant as any disrespect to it. At the time, it was literally trying to, elicit the formulas that what it was. And I'm like, well, why is this movie considered a romance and this movie not considered a romance?
Well, and the thing is that movies are really different than books. Movies have different tropes and different expectations for books. For romance in a book, if you are writing a capital R romance, there is the one rule to rule them all, which is that you must have the happy ever after, or the HEA. It
Right.
can be an HFN, a happy for now, but
Right.
there has to be that emotionally satisfying, optimistic ending. If your book ends with one of the characters dying, it's Nicholas Sparks. It's not a capital R romance.
Gotcha.
And let me just add a little bit that part of what makes it the romantic journey in a book as opposed to in a movie a lot of the times is that it's part of the character transformation that the characters have to change in order to embrace or find true love. That there are things that are holding them back. And with fantasy romance, this can interweave with whatever character flaw is holding them back from completing the quest. You know, like whatever it is that they must overcome into themselves to find the MacGuffin or to find true love. It could be the same thing, it could be connected or different, but that's part of the character growing and changing so that by the end, and often they have to make a sacrifice, that you can't just have the love come together. And this is as opposed to in what happens in a lot of movies is they'll have, like all the reasons why the characters can't be together, oh, we've got these terrible problems. And at the end, they'll be like, oh gosh, our problems don't matter. I just love you. And you can't get away with that in a book.
Yeah, actually, I saw that in just last night in a movie. There are two people, it's like suddenly they fall into bed with each other. And I'm like, why are they there was nothing building up to that. They just suddenly started kissing. And it's like, why? Because they're two attractive leads in a movie. That's why.
Yeah. And the director said, okay, now fall into bed. Yeah.
Exactly. One of the questions that came up from the chat audience is, have you seen romance writing change as we have evolved our ideas of gender and sexuality?
Oh, well, sure. I mean, some of this has been going on for a long time and, wasn't surfaced. There have been writers who have been writing homosexual romances or polyamorous romances for a long time, but there's been a lot more now that people are out there saying we really want different kinds of romances. We want romances about ace people. We want realistic depictions. I don't know why I want depictions, of bisexuality or of polyamory, that there's a lot of richness in the field now and a lot of conscious effort to promote diversity of all kinds, in gender and connections and color and cultural backgrounds. So in some ways, I feel like romance has been ahead of science fiction and fantasy to some extent. And I say that as being someone who has been swimming in both pools, that romance writers tend to be a little bit more early adopters overall for whatever reason.
And activists as well, I would say.
It's true.
That's definitely there. I've had people who will talk about, oh, they're just reading a romance. I'm like, among other things, romance is keeping the publishing industry alive.
There's that.
Book sales as well. Have you also, with the rise of indie publishing, and by rise, I guess I mean the barriers to entry are lower, in that not that it's easy by any means, and not that it's easy to get, I heard someone phrase it as, they think they'll just be able to publish online and make millions of dollars. And I'm like, well, no, that's probably unrealistic. But you could probably make a living if you put in the work that is actually necessary to do that. Have you found that to be the case? I noticed you started teaching both writing workshops and also I believe you're teaching like sort of the business side of things too, yes?
Yeah, I do a lot of author coaching. And so it ends up being sometimes more one thing or the other. And sometimes I give workshops on both things, depending on what people ask for. One thing that happens with self-publishing is that the self-publishing people are really, really good at the business side of stuff. And I think it's partly because there's a lot of information out there and the business stuff can be learned. That, you know, you can learn to market your books. You can learn how to set up your covers. You can learn how to do Facebook ads or Amazon Marketing Services ads. You can learn how to do all of these things. And you can throw a lot of money at it if you have the money to throw at it. And you can achieve some success. What I'm seeing more and more of lately, and I've had a few people come to me and saying, okay, I've learned all this stuff. I'm doing everything that all the experts say to do, and my books are still not successful. What am I doing wrong? And there was an interesting article not long ago on the Passive Voice that referenced this and kind of talked about that it's become a little bit of the elephant in the room, that what's happening is sometimes the problem is that the books just aren't that great. And we don't like to say this because nobody wants to point at someone else and say, you know, that book's not good. And I'm someone who will be a vociferous defender, for example, of Stephanie Meyer. You know, like when people are like, oh, you know, the problem with Twilight is it's just not written well. Name that famous author who said that. And the thing is, you know, people don't read 500 pages of a novel that's not written well. You know, you can complain about that maybe it's not the prose style you like, or it's not lyrical, or, you know, what have you, but that's not the problem. You know, it's that it's compellingly written enough that all of these people read these books, right? But with some, the thing is that with storytelling, there are aspects of the craft that can be taught and a lot of things that can't be taught. And a lot of what can't be taught just comes from a whole lot of practice, writing a whole lot of words. And what happened with the bad old days of gatekeeping, you know, was that people like me, you know, would have these weird novels that no one would want to buy. But it also forced me, I rewrote that first novel like 5 times because I kept trying to find ways that they would accept it. And ultimately I did sell the book, but it was going through that iterative process of revising and rewriting and having different people look at it and learn it. And, you know, if I had the access to self-publishing that I have now, I think about if I had self-published an early version of that book, you know, I thought it was ready. I didn't know any better. I was a newbie idiot. I thought it was wonderful. And it wasn't, you know, there were a lot of.
No. She froze. Uh-oh. So am I still live?
Sorry, I froze there. Where did I?
Oh, okay, cool. I was just wondering whether it was everybody. Yes. You were saying that if you had published that first novel, who knows if it would have worked out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that I didn't. I'm glad I didn't publish early iterations of that novel.
Gotcha. So, I mean, let's dig into it then. What is the difference between a fantasy romance and a romantic fantasy? Like, where's the dividing line? Like, I also see the BDSM romance and erotic romance. I'm like, well, one has accessories and one doesn't. That's
well, yeah, I suppose. I mean, BDSM is a very specific subgenre, and we usually label it because not everyone likes that.
Yeah.
It's, you know, a lot of it has to do with where the spine of the story is. Okay. So we talk about, could you take out the romance and have the story still hang together? Would there still be a story to tell? And that kind of influences whether it's more one thing or the other. I tend to write pretty solidly down the middle with, I very often write the hero's journey and it's intertwined with the romance arc. Mm-hmm. but that's my particular take. There are other authors who are much more one or the other. I think it's a really interesting perspective that I learned from being on a panel with Mary Robinette Kowal, was that she was sort of coaxed us through thinking about that science fiction and fantasy don't have a standard plot arc. That if you say, well, what is the plot arc of a fantasy novel, you could come up with a bunch of different examples. As opposed to if I ask you, what's the plot arc of a mystery? What's the plot arc of a thriller? What's the plot arc of a romance? With science fiction and fantasy, those tend to be more about the setting, the milieu, what's taking place, elements of the story. And we take other plots and we put them into this milieu. So that's why, very often we'll have like a murder mystery, essentially, but set in space.
Right.
And, a lot of fantasy novels, we can talk about what the different kinds of plots are. But, like a Naomi Novik plot is really different from a George R.R. Martin plot. But we recognize them both as fantasy, right? So mine are alternate world fantasies that very often have a romance plot arc.
Okay. I like that phrase spine of the book makes it, that works, that makes it incredibly clear for me. I appreciate that. I wish I was asked that question again, that I found those answers to, because I would totally change it. How do you decide, another way I've heard it described is, well, a romance is one that has naughty bits in it. And that is kind of I have had it. One of my biggest pet peeves is to read about some far off civilization, far off in whatever direction you want to be. And somehow it also happens to have all of the same Judeo-Christian hangups that contemporary Western society has, in any way, shape, or form. So how do you decide what, when you're creating a new world or writing about something that is different, how do you decide how different or how similar to make both mores, and also how do you decide, I guess, how explicit you're going to make it? Does it depend on the market, or?
Well, the latter question is a shorter answer. Is I just tend to write explicit because that's how I do. That's just how my stories come out. I'm much more willing to be explicit with sex than with violence. So I occasionally have tried to write what we refer to as closed door, where, like the door is closed and the train goes through the tunnel or what have you. Yeah. And I don't like to, because to me, that's one of the interesting parts. But I'm also very interested in how sexuality and intimacy figure into character transformation. Mm-hmm. So, occasionally I'll have people tell me simultaneously that they read my books but skip the sex scenes, and then also say, but then the character transformation doesn't make any sense. And I'll say, yeah, that part that you skipped, there was actually something in there, but totally up to you.
I skipped over chapters of your book, but it didn't make sense. Yeah, that's
my favorite part, favorite thing. I've had people come up to me and say, I love your books, I just skipped the pornography. Okay, thank you for that.
It's not pornography, it's erotica.
Yeah. So then the first part of your question, remind me, sorry.
When you are creating, assuming you're writing a fantasy that is like in another world or a science fiction
the mores
side of it, how do you choose to recreate, what parts of our society you make familiar, and how unfamiliar can you make it before somebody goes, wait a minute?
Well, I think it's really important, and this is something that's really relevant today, where a lot of us are practicing examining our own privilege and examining our own biases and being aware of that our immediate knee-jerk reaction is a reflection of cultural programming as opposed to being a thought-out response. And I think in our world building, we have to go through that same process, because a lot of these worlds, which are, one of my themes lately is writers who make the world patriarchal for no good reason. Like where, all of these things are based around the fact of protecting women from sexual peril. And it's like, yeah, but why are you assuming that this world has to be this way? Why are you assuming women don't know how to fight? Why are you assuming women don't have access to birth control? Why are you assuming there's no penalties for rape? It's like, just because that's going on in our culture doesn't mean it has to in another world. So a lot of this has to be, if you're going to be building a world, then all of those need to be conscious choices. And if you have something in there like, well, only men can be king. It's like, well, why? Why? Figure out what the social structure of your world is that dictates that. And if there's not a good reason for it, change it. If your fighting forces are entirely male. What's that?
If you want to be sure of line of succession, matriarchies make much more sense, because you're pretty sure whose mother it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so there's all of these things, and like you say, with the Judeo-Christian, that we default to that, and you can actually move away from those knee-jerk assumptions without culturally appropriating someone else, which is what a lot of people seem to go to. It's like, oh, well, then I'll make it Islam instead. It's like, well, why don't you just make it something else entirely? Make it a religion based on blood sacrifice or on the dirt.
Yeah.
I mean, we're supposed to be creative, right? Be creative, make it be something else.
Make anything you want. Why are you going to make the same old thing, right?
Exactly.
Wow. I feel like, and this may just be a personally, like I could sit and chat with you about genre stuff for hours. Because this is all fascinating, but I'm the executive director of a nonprofit, so we have to talk about nonprofit stuff.
All right, let's talk.
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to say, in general, because we don't say it often enough, while we're glad that you're here on Twitch stream, to all you viewers, we also have worldbuildersmarket.com, which is where we sell really cool merchandise from authors like Jeffe Kennedy, although we don't have any of your stuff yet. I think we need to talk about changing that. Oh. And that not only helps us out, but it also helps out the creators themselves. You can see behind me some examples of artwork that was created by various people we work with, such as Karen Hallian and Nate Taylor. And we would love to have your continued support on that kind of stuff. So thank you. There.
I made some noise there, sorry, but look, I have to show you.
Yay!
It's hanging off of my monitor. I love Karen Hallian.
Oh, she's fantastic. And she,
fantastic.
Yeah, her calendars, we're actually going to be starting to carry her new calendar. We've done that pretty much every year. And this particular series of the various types, I actually like the one that has all of the people on it, but that doesn't show up well on this particular, on the Zooms. So,
oh, gotcha.
This particular one here. So you have been director at large for SFWA before, Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. And I have learned that there's not an extra F in there because science fiction is hyphenated, and that it is of America, not the association, although that's looking at getting changed. I guess the first question is, like, you already are busy enough managing your writing empire. Why did you decide that you needed to serve on the board? What made you say, I need to do something for this nonprofit?
That's a good question. One thing I've found is that many of us who are volunteers, that volunteering is a big part of our lives, we come from volunteer families. And I think that that's just sort of in the bedrock of my nature, is that I have always volunteered for organizations, back in high school even. And my parents have always been volunteers for political campaigns and for, Cancer Society, this sort of thing. I also believe that when you are part of a part of a profession, it is incumbent upon you to belong to your professional organization. So I'm never a good one to give an answer when people say, why should I join SFWA? I'm like, you should join SFWA because it's your professional organization. So like, what can SFWA do for you? It's like, well, actually, I think you should belong to your professional organization. I think volunteering for the organization is one of the best ways to support your profession because you are giving to the thing that helps protect and defend your profession. And also volunteering is how you get to know other people. It's how you form friendships. A huge part of my social network comes from volunteering. And I've been on the board for 4 years. I've served 2 terms as director of large, and now I'll do 2 years as president. And it's great working with these people and solving problems, and fighting the good fight. All of these things I think are really important in life.
What I'm not necessarily familiar. Does director at large automatically move into the president position, or what made you decide to take that active a role? Because that's
Mary Robinette asked me to.
Oh, I will. You know what? That would be enough. Yeah.
She's very good at volunteering. I don't know if you've encountered that.
I haven't experienced it personally, but I can definitely see that. Yes. Also, thank you for that word, volunteering.
It's Mary Robinette's word, actually, because I was like, wait, did you just make me volunteer for something? And she said, yes, I've only told you. But yeah, she did ask me fairly early on in her term as president if I would be willing to run as president after her. And I had to think about it for a while. She was not the first person to ask me if I would, but I felt like, part of the reason she asked me and I agreed was that it takes longer than 2 years to get things done. I mean, it's especially when, this, running a nonprofit, it's largely volunteer. Change comes slowly, sometimes frustratingly slowly to other people, but you have these initiatives that you put in place and you just chip away at them, and you move them forward incrementally. And so it's really good if you can have that continuity so that things that Mary Robinette and I worked on together along with the rest of the board, I'm already hip deep in them and I know all of the mechanisms. I know what we're trying to do, so I can just help keep pushing that forward without having a big drop off in between.
Well, I know that you can't necessarily, give any trade secrets per se, but do you see any particular challenges ahead in your tenure that you're either rolling up your sleeves to get ready to do?
We're going to make some changes. We've been working for a long time on improving our diversity and inclusiveness, and that has expanded to including more media. We decided we do an annual strategic visioning where the board and our key staff get together and we talk about what do we see for SFWA, where do we want to be in 10 years, what do we feel like the purpose is, what are we trying to do here. And we feel like that serving the science fiction and fantasy genre includes embracing people who are working in it in all kinds of media, which is different than how SFWA originally started because it was very much about prose. And we have been doing a lot over the last few years with, and traditionally published prose. So, we accepted self-publishing writers, we started accepting game writers, we are in the process of accepting comics and graphic novel creators. As our world changes and as our technology changes, people are finding more and more creative media in which to express stories, and not all of them fit into that prose framework. And we still have people who are like, my gosh, it should be about prose. And it's like, well, we're moving past that. We're doing these things, like where people are doing the games and we're doing Twitch and whatever those kids out there are doing these days. And we want to be responsive to that. We want to embrace storytelling in all its myriad diversity. So that's a big piece. I don't feel like I'm talking out of school when I say that one of the things we would like to start doing is creating more of a local presence so that people can network locally in SFWA sponsored ways through reading series and other types of groups. And you mentioned that we're in some ways we're still coping with the big change in our nonprofit status, where we moved into being a charitable organization. And really, our CFO, Nathan Lowell, argues that we became a new organization at that point in time because it was such a major change that was shepherded in by Scalzi, so almost 10 years ago now. But we're still processing the fallout of that. And some of that does come into that, that we may have to be association instead of America, which our international members have been urging us for some time to do anyway, because they're like, why is it of America? And it's like, well, because the argument was that we were focusing on the American publishing industry, that's what we could affect and that's what we knew about. But as we open up into more media and we feel like it's within our vision that science fiction and fantasy is a worldwide thing, and we want to be able to be responsive to all creators in the genre.
Nice. Wow. Well said.
Oh, thank you.
So in terms of the extra media, this is actually, we actually made it through most of my questions that I had. But speaking of moving into other kinds of media, tell us about the whole First Cup of Coffee and the Frolic Media podcast things that you do.
Well, First Cup of Coffee is my podcast, and I do that 4 days a week, just for 20 minutes where I chat over my first cup of coffee. I was inspired to do that actually by Nathan Lowell, our CFO. He has a podcast called Talking on My Morning Walk. And it's about 20 minutes long, and he just takes his phone with him and he chats as he does his 20-minute morning walk. And I thought, well, I could do that, it's short. And so it's very informal. I have very low production values. Occasionally I get people giving me advice on how to improve my production values, and I'm like, I'm not going to do that, because for me, the most important thing is the writing. That's where the lion's share of my energy has to go. That's the main focus. The podcast helps support getting my books out there. But then I also just wanted it to be an authentic and honest discussion of daily life of being a career author. And so I talk about my ups and downs, and I talk about what I'm writing and when I get stuck and how I'm working my way through problems. I talk about my cats. I talk about the weather. I talk about whatever comes to mind. And sometimes I rant about things going on in the industry. Sometimes I have to remember not to rant about some things. But yeah, that's what it is. And then Frolic is mainly romance, but they put together the Frolic Podcast Network of romance themed or influenced podcasts. And they invited me probably a couple of years ago now that I think about it, to be part of that network. And so we do cross promo, and we occasionally get stuff from various publishers asking us to, and they pay us to, give shout outs to various books and that sort of thing. And
nice. Well, I can say that, part of my research before this was actually to get to enjoy a couple of those episodes of the First Cup of Coffee. And, as someone who's been in the podcast game since it started, I 100% agree with you. It is the content and the consistency that is the most important thing. And, it's like, if I said, hey, would you like to have a cup of coffee in the morning with the president of SFWA and, an award-winning author? You're like, yeah, absolutely. It's like, well, there you go. You can.
There you go.
I would, not that this would count for much, but you have the endorsement of, the executive director of Worldbuilders for your podcast.
It actually means a great deal. I appreciate that.
Really well, a very pleasant way to spend 20 minutes having coffee. So I'd like to do the lightning round, what we call, which is actually just kind of a getting to know you personally, you know, not big time, you know, deep questions about organizations and genres and things.
It's not going to be like the Rorschach test, right? Where you're going to try to trick me into revealing some.
No, actually, it's more of a but yes and no. We do want you to have the Rorschach test, and the first thing that comes to mind. Don't think too deep about the question.
Okay.
If I was going to say, you know, hey, I can get you your beverage of choice. Like, what is your favorite beverage? Alcoholic, non-alcoholic, whatever.
A glass of wine.
Glass of wine.
Yep.
Let's narrow it down. What kind of wine? What's your favorite wine?
Oh, I can have anything I want.
Anything.
Give me a Brut Cava.
Okay, I haven't actually heard of that, so I have to write it down and look it up. Then again, I tend to get wine based on whether it has a cool looking label. So,
well, that is an influence.
Unfortunately. And how about if I said, hey, we can give you anything you want for your next meal? What are you in the mood for?
Am I being good or am I indulging?
I will say no consequences.
No consequences. I will have a slice of chocolate cake, please.
Okay.
Especially if it has multiple layers with lots of frosting between.
We have very similar tastes there. If I said, you know, we talked a lot about your books. If I said, hey, can you tell me I have to go on a trip, I need to bring along a book to read, what would you recommend I pick up?
I always hate answering this question.
I'm going to make it even harder because you nailed me there in that I am not someone who would identify himself as someone who is a fan of romance. Although I do cry every time I watch Prince of Tides. So, you know, there's something in there. What would you say would be a good book, a good romance book for me to read?
Oh, okay. It's always interesting to think about how to convert people to romance because it feels like a lot of pressure, right? One thing, whenever people tell me they don't read romance, I'll say, well, what book turns you off the genre? And they like haven't read any at all. So I would suggest reading Maria Vale's The Last Wolf. I think that's what it's called. I'll have to do a real quick. I think that's the first in her Wolves series.
Well, that's cheeky to call the first book The Last Wolf.
Yes, but that's the correct one. Wonderful, gritty, delves into the natural lives of wolves who actually have the ability to shapeshift into humans. So, and there's a wonderful love affair. I would also suggest, if you want something that's a denser fantasy, one that's very popular is Grace Draven's Radiance. And Radiance is a story about an interspecies marriage of state that's wonderful, rich fantasy with a great kind of enemies to lovers romance in it. Okay,
great. Thank you. Those are two things I'd read. And what if I said, you know what, I don't have enough room for a book in my thing, but I want to download something to my iPad so I can stream it and binge watch it, like a series or a movie? Is there something you would recommend?
You know, I'm just totally into Lucifer right now.
There you go. See, you got me there.
I was a late adopter to Lucifer. I only started watching it like a month ago, but I am totally binging it, and I think it's fantastic.
If you want to have a sort of an interesting little twist for your mind, I'm in the midst of, I think, season 2 right now, Lucifer, because a friend of mine said I should watch it. So I'm also enjoying it. But as a little twist, we took a side detour into watching the British comedy Miranda, which has Tom Ellis in it.
Oh, okay.
As a very non-Lucifer character.
Interesting.
And it is both a lot of fun and just kind of weird to see this character that has this certain
not being Lucifer.
Yeah, not being Lucifer, exactly. And it's also just delightful. It's a fun little thing. So very much a farce. Okay, last question. I have a magic wand in my hand that looks like a fountain pen, but it is a magic wand, and I can wave my magic wand, and absolutely anyone, past, present, future, alive, dead, fictional, or real, any one character will appear and want to have a conversation with you.
Oh.
Who would you like me to have manifest to appear? Who would you like to have a conversation with?
You know, I would pick Anne McCaffrey.
Oh, okay.
It's one of my great regrets that Anne McCaffrey died before I could meet her. And I feel very, I guess that would be another component of being a part of SFWA is Anne McCaffrey is apparently the one who back in the day had the big fight with Jerry Purnell and said that it should be science fiction and fantasy writers of America. And she was my Dragon Song was my gateway drug to fantasy. And I have read everything she's ever written. And I did get to talk with Jane Yolen when Jane was the SFWA Grandmaster. And I didn't realize at the time, but that she was very good friends with Anne McCaffrey. And I asked her what Anne was like. And look, I get a little verklempt talking about, we both sat there and kind of cried talking about, this woman that I never met, but it was that I wish I had.
You're getting some cheers from the chat. That's a great choice. Yeah. And absolutely, Dragon Riders of Pern was definitely a very influential work in my youth. I mean,
yes.
Yep. That I wanted a brown dragon so badly.
See, I was going to go for the queen. I wanted that queen dragon.
It's kind of like Star Wars. Like, who's your favorite character in Dragon in the Pern things? Will tell us something about where it.
I loved that Lessa was this strong and determined and smart, that she, took revenge and she was wily. And I liked that. I think Lessa was one of the first female characters I read who wasn't nice to people all the time, and that was okay, that she was still admirable, even though she would chew people a new one and all of that. I was like, oh, wow, I might be like Lessa.
Yeah, Gamma Liz actually is the person in chat who said wanted to be a harper, actually.
I would have, I would have gone to Harper Hall, except that I really have just no musical talent.
Gotcha.
I'll ride the dragon.
Yeah.
You guys make the music.
I should add, Gamma Liz also, I believe, is spearheading a upcoming fundraiser this next weekend. And Gamma Liz, feel free to put the link in the chat if you'd like. We can mention it as we go along. But yeah, another geek doing good, people doing gaming and things like that.
It's awesome.
For good causes. And we are right at time. It has been a delight. And obviously, I feel like, we could go, have some chocolate cake and talk about all the different characters in various books that we like. But I hope we can, this won't be the first time we have you on Worldbuilders Weekly or as part of our, Worldbuilders work.
I'm happy to come on anytime.
We have a long list of places where people can find you, Facebook, Goodreads, YouTube, JeffeKennedy.com, and you're very active on Twitter, which is also a very easy one, @JeffeKennedy. Do you have a particular place that you prefer people buy your books from?
No, not necessarily. I do have a website store where you can buy a lot of my books. You can get print books that I've signed if you want to do that. But, I'm very much a fan of buy them wherever it makes you happy to buy them.
Great. Right. I love that idea. Yes. And we also like to think of ourselves as sort of your neighborhood bookstore that happens to be online. When we're doing that kind of thing. And just to give a shout out for its Draw for Charity, 48-hour stream this weekend benefiting Child's Play. And you can find that at twitter.com/charitydraw4. So I definitely plan on making an appearance there as well to support them. All right, so people, please let us know. And actually, Jeffe, I'll ask you, if you know of people that you think might enjoy coming and talking with us, please feel free to recommend it. Hopefully you enjoyed our talk. But we definitely like to have more people on Worldbuilders Weekly. And also, please remember to check out Worldbuilders Market for various unique, rare, and even epic level items, autographed editions of books, tabletop games, art, homewares, and many other kinds of fun geek stuff, all of it going to support our mission of Geeks Doing Good. And one of the things that I was thinking about this last weekend is that one of the reasons people say, well, I know you raise money for Heifer International, but why don't we just donate to Heifer International? And it's like, well, and I don't know, I think that probably SFWA could have done just as much, done a good job on an auction, but there was a reason that you came to ask Worldbuilders for help in doing it, because it is what we do. It is literally what we do. So we like to think that, you know, if you donate to support us, not only are we helping out creators, but we're sort of a, we amplify the impact of your dollar. So if you donate $10 straight to Heifer International, great, you should do that. But if you donate also to us, we will turn that money into $100 for Heifer International by working to help gather the power of the geek community. So that is what we do and why we keep doing this every week. So Jeffe, thank you so much. It has been a delight, and I wish you the best on your new tenure as president.
Thank you. And
also thank you for doing that kind of work.
Oh, well, thank you.
As both a fan and somebody involved in the industry, I really appreciate it. The way we sign off, we actually use a phrase called vivamus, which is Latin, but it kind of turned into a viva moose, which is like a party animal kind of situation. And then we use a different one. So I'm going to reference a song from my SCA days, which was called the Moose Song. And we will say kiss a moose is our sign-off word. And now as soon as you put that word into the chat, we'll know that the stream is done. So kiss a moose.